The United Nations Security Council has formally invited Kenya to present its request to have the International Criminal Court cases facing President Uhuru Kenyatta, Deputy President William Ruto and broadcaster Arap Sang dropped. In a letter to Kenya's ambassador to the UN, Macharia Kamau, the Council invited Kenya to argue its request on Thursday at a plenary session of the UN Security Council. The envoy is expected to question the jurisdiction, partiality and competence of the ICC. He will also be seeking to convince the UN Security Council that the case is wine bad taste and politically motivated. The three are facing charges of crimes against humanity following Kenya's 2007 post-election violence. So let's discuss this further with Harun Dubi joining us here in studio. He's a lawyer and policy analyst. Harun, always a pleasure to have you with us. What are the legal implications of this development by Kenya to have to withdraw the cases from the ICC?
I think there are two things which need to be noted. First is that there is a judicial legal process that is ongoing before the court, and two, there is a political process that Kenya is currently kind of engaged in, especially with regard to the letter that the ambassador to the UN wrote to the Security Council. In regard to the case itself and whether the Security Council has jurisdiction to terminate the case, it is important to remember that the Security Council can only urge the court to postpone the case for no more than 12 months in a certain situation where the continued trial of the case threatens regional peace, not just peace in the country, but regional peace. Now, that is one of the arguments that our ambassador, the Kenya ambassador to the UN, seemed to pose, that if the case continues, it will be a threat to regional peace. But of course, we have noticed that the deputy president was in The Hague only a week ago, and he came back, and even within the country, there has not been a measure of any tension. So there are issues. But I think in overall, one would like to say two things, perhaps. One, the member state called Kenya has decided, the government has decided to deal with the political environment around the case in a political manner and leave the parties, the defendants themselves, to deal with the legal issues, which probably is reflected by their silence on what is ongoing with the government, and also reflect because I think today I heard our Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs saying that the government has not changed its attitude and its regard for the ICC and continues to cooperate. But of course, the other thing one needs to note is that that letter seemed to be a precursor to non-cooperation. It's a subtle message that the government of Kenya is not willing to cooperate, because after all, if it were cooperating with the ICC as a court, one would expect that it will respect its jurisdiction and wait for the determination of the case on their merit or on any other technicality other than impugning its jurisdiction, it is partiality or impartiality in a political forum such as the Security Council. And
now, Aaron, in the discharge of justice, do you think Kenya is justified to do this, especially given that there are victims who are also seeking redress through the same courts?
That is the big question, because even for the court to consider a deferral of the case, one would, the law requires that the country, the member state that is seeking a deferral, demonstrates that it is actively investigating those people that are charged before the court regarding those charges, the offenses they are accused of, and that it is doing everything possible to do justice to all of them, especially knowing that the ICC was established to deal with impunity. Right. Unfortunately, the letter failed to demonstrate in any way what Kenya is doing. And not just anything that it's doing, like establishing the ICC, the International Criminal Division of the High Court, or that the DPP is now a separate office from the Attorney General's office, or that we have a more independent judiciary than we did 5 or 10 years ago. It needs to say William Ruto, Uhuru Kenyatta, and Arap Sang are actually under active investigations or are undergoing trial in Kenya. Right. Now, that has not been demonstrated, and the letter seemed to avoid the legal questions, which is why I'm thinking that I think the contest between justice and peace is really coming out through the presentation by the envoy and also the Kenya government, because there are people who think that justice and peace are mutually exclusive. Actually, they are not only mutually inclusive, but they are interdependent. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
However, that contest has never been settled, and I think that is really the debate. But as you ask, the post-election violence victims and their families to date are still waiting for justice. So the judgment on whether Kenya is justified in this will actually be said that it is difficult to show that Kenya is justified, because fighting impunity is not protection of government. It is actually fighting impunity, and it can't come at a worse time, actually, with the TJRC report impugning the president and the deputy president.
So how is this then likely to play out now that we have Kenya facing the Security Council?
Well, at the Security Council, I think probably they were also doing diplo-speak or diplomatic speak, where they're saying a member state has requested for audience, give them audience. Let them come and tell us what they're saying. But the member states already have opinions, and those opinions will play out during the debate. But remember that the African Union, which on the one hand supports the United Nations, which supports the ICC, because the ICC is an organ of the UN. It is also, on the other hand, fighting very hard to say they are campaigning between themselves to move out of the ICC, right, and also to establish kind of a parallel institution like the ICC for African nations in Kenya. And I think this is really the politics of trying to show where are we as a continent. But suffice it to say, to point out that Africa as a continent, as a group of nations, has the highest number of member countries who have signed and ratified the Rome Statute. And therefore it is a question that I ask myself all along, that did we sign without reading the fine print, or did we not expect that the medicine we prescribed for another, we might be required to take it one time?
Good question, Aaron. Thank you very much for joining us. As Aaron Duby is discussing the ICC question in regards to Kenya asking the UN Security Council to consider the withdrawal of those cases from the ICC.